Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you on this beautiful day. It is Wednesday, August 8th. Can you believe we're already in August? And oh my goodness, what a beautiful morning. 75 out this morning. Looks like it's going to be a hot one though, so be careful out there. Actually, I think I saw somewhere it's like a heat advisory. You don't get those too often, but it seems like, can I get on just my soapbox a little bit? 10 years ago, they would say on the evening news, okay, it's going to be hot, or there's a storm coming, or a flood, and all that sort of thing. Now, the National Weather Service sends out these alerts on your cell phone that are just these loud alerts. Doesn't matter what you're doing. They wake you up, or they're just these loud alerts. So you have to be listening to these, have your phone ready to go for these loud alerts. Anyway, and it seems like I think last week I got 10 or something like that. I know that it was raining, but I don't need to know that there's a flood warning every time there's a flood warning. And I don't know why they feel like I need to know that. In one respect, I appreciate that they're concerned about my health, but on the other hand, it seems like a little bit too much. So anyway, you drive on the street, you see water, you stop, you don't go into the wash. These are things that you just do if you live in Arizona and Phoenix, Tucson. All right, so let's see, what else? It is Wednesday. Can you believe that after today, the week's more than half over? We have a birthday today, a wonderful birthday today. A fine young man, Caleb Spock. Caleb, happy birthday to you. May God bless you and grant you peace all day today. Great to just offer you these birthday wishes. May you have an awesome day. And let's see, what else? I'm not going to talk about the pandemic. I'm not going to talk about masking. I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff. I think maybe we'll just go ahead and get into our Bible study because we got a great one today. We'll just do that. We are in episode 47 of this study, Exodus, God's Great Rescue. And we have been now applying the Ten Commandments to everyday situations that Moses would come across. And yesterday we talked about murder, whether or not it was intentional or accidental. And we also talked about the relationship between children and their parents and what parents are allowed to do in that one. But we're going to go now and we're going to talk about quarreling and what happens if you get in an argument with somebody else. All right, so let's just go ahead and get into it. This is Exodus chapter 21. We'll begin reading at verse 18. If people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fist and the victim does not die but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with the staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured person for any loss of time and see what the victim is completely healed. See that the victim is completely healed. Okay, so this would be kind of an extension of you should not kill. Basically, at one level, you are taking that person's ability to earn money for the tribe or their family, and you've taken away that ability because you've injured them. So now they're laid up in bed, they're going to heal, but while they're healing, they can't earn money. And so basically, if you cause this injury, then out of your own earnings, you have to help support and provide for this person while he's laid up in bed. And this seems like a reasonable thing to do, but human nature, what it is, you have to imagine that there are some people that are going to milk this for all it's worth. For example, you injure somebody, you hurt your arm, and you're in bed, and it should take 6 to 8 weeks to heal. At the end of 6 to 8 weeks, it's like, oh no, I still can't, come back in another 6 to 8 weeks. So at some level, somebody needs to go right and check on this person and say, okay, are you still injured, or do we, how is this all going forward? So anyway, because human nature, everybody will try to milk the system or gain the system as much as they possibly can. That's just human nature. Honest people don't try to do that. And if you are a follower of Jesus Christ and you want to live the life that Jesus has for you, you'd never try to game the system. That's not something you should do, because God calls us to be servants in the world. He calls us to serve the world. And in the Old Testament, obviously the tithe, the 10% was kind of protecting you against making sure that you didn't, violate that. But in the New Testament, the tithe is no longer required, but we still are called to serve the world. And so we're called to do that. So basically the bottom line is, this doesn't apply to us anymore, right? Because we have a whole different legal system that takes care of this thing. And plus we put into place all sorts of things that help us, like health insurance and Medicare and Medicaid and all sorts of things that help us with this. So it's not necessarily applicable today. But it is interesting that even back at the time of Moses, we had to compensate somebody for the damage. And like today, this doesn't happen. We don't normally strike somebody and hit them with a stone, but we do when we're driving along. And if the accident is our fault and we hit somebody, that is on us. And if we hit somebody and kill them, that is on us also. So this doesn't go away. This is something that still exists today. That's why we carry insurance on our car, so that if we cause somebody to be injured, that we can pay their medical bills, we can compensate them for their car. There's all sorts of things. But the more complex the society gets, the more it costs to do these things. So if you don't want to have the threat of hurting somebody or injuring somebody or killing somebody in a car wreck, you just stop driving. But how many of us can live in a society where you can live without a car? It's hard here in Vail, almost impossible. It's pretty hard in Tucson, but in many, 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 many places around the world, it's not difficult at all to get around without a car. You could get around with a bicycle. As a matter of fact, that's fairly common in most places of the world. We here in the United States have chosen to have automobiles so that we can create. The great thing about an automobile is that you can live farther away from the city center and be able to get to work every day. Although other countries have solved that with trains, other people have solved that with bicycles. So automobile isn't the only way to do that. In a way, I'm almost sad that we've solved it with the automobile, because we've become an automobile-dependent society. And I was a traffic engineer for years, so I love the automobile. But there are other ways to solve the problem of land uses and things like that without having the automobile and the smog and the pollution and the depletion of natural resources that comes from that. But who am I? I'm just a guy living in Vail. The world goes on as it will without my help. We'll continue on. Verse 20. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. So slaves are different. Remember, this is slave or servant. This is not African slavery per se. This is somebody that may have sold themselves into slavery, or perhaps the tribe sold somebody into slavery. I mean, there is a whole lot of things that can go on here that would create this situation. If you owned a slave back there and you beat a slave, which apparently was completely legal, but if you beat a slave and the slave died, then if you beat the slave and nothing happens, the slave can still move, then nothing. But if the slave dies, then there must be punished, and what that punishment is up to Moses, basically. I have no idea what the punishment would be. It could be a financial punishment. It might be, you have to. Who knows? Who knows what the punishment was? But if it's not a slave and you kill somebody, the punishment is death. So that for sure is going to happen. But if you beat a slave to death, then it's your slave. Then because it's your property, you're not going to be killed, which We look at it now, thousands of years later, and we think this is horrible, but this is kind of how that society developed. And it's hard to go back into time with our knowledge of how things go and judge them for the things they were doing. They were living thousands of years ago. Their society had developed with all these rules and regulations the best they could. So you can't go back in time. This is specific to that time period. Interesting, the next one, verse 22. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined, whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Oh my goodness. So this is the section in Scripture that says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And this one is hard. And again, you got to wonder if this was actually ever applied. Because if you accidentally take somebody's eye out, that's one thing. But if you purposely gouge somebody's eye out, are they really, really going to come and gouge your eye out? That doesn't seem fair. It seems like it would be better to be fined in that case. And perhaps if you have money, maybe you could buy your way out of this and not have your eye, come out. But this is what it's written, and I can't imagine how difficult it must be without pain, relievers or anything like that, to go and cut out somebody's eye or cut off somebody's foot or tooth or hand or something like that. Just a horrible, horrible thing. Probably they would want to try to do everything in their in their power to try to make it so that, that maybe they could do a fine or a punishment other than take out somebody's eye. Now, this eventually turns into, if you know anything about the current Islam religion today, as it's practiced in some communities in the Middle East, they actually do still do things like this. Like one of the punishments that you can have for stealing is to actually have your arm cut off. And so who is a thief because their arm was cut off, because they don't have, one of the things about punishment in prisons is that prisons cost a lot of money. You have to house that prisoner, feed that prisoner, make sure that there's a system to keep that prisoner away from the population and all that stuff. And here in the United States, we do an imprisonment system, but some places around the world, they just can't afford imprisonment systems. And plus there's a lot of psychological damage for a prison system too. So what they do may seem crazy, but they'll just cut off a person's hand. And so you're marked for life as a thief. So that's the humility and shame of that for the rest of your life. But then they don't have to imprison you, right? And you wouldn't want to do it again, because then they'll cut off your other arm. And then how hard is it to live? I mean, it's hard enough to live with one hand, but how hard would it be to live with two hands? And then, of course, if there's also the shame of person born without a hand. Were they born without a hand, or did God punish them because of something and make them born without a hand? Or were they born with the hand and, they have to live with the shame and punishment of living without a hand? So no system of justice is perfect. It's always difficult no matter what. Because of human sin, it is always difficult to manage these things. If we lived in a world where people didn't sin, it would be wonderful, because then we wouldn't have to have all these punishments, but it's impossible. People are born into sin, at least, of course, to Augustine. He said we're born with original sin. So this is part of life. It's part of humanity. And if the woman gives birth prematurely but no serious injury, then the person's fined. But if you strike a woman, but there's serious injury, or you take her life, you strike a pregnant woman and the child dies, then you could very well die yourself. Or if you strike a woman and it's born without an eye or without a tooth, or whatever, you might have to pay penalty for that. Let's go to verse 26. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out a tooth of a male or female slave must let the tooth go free and compensate for the tooth. So you wouldn't think, what's a big deal about a tooth, right? But just think of how difficult it is to live without teeth. It's hard to eat without teeth. I mean, back then, they did not have the soft food that we have today. Did you know that peanut butter was an invention of a doctor who said some people have a hard time eating meat because they have no teeth, and you have to have teeth if you're going to chew meat, and that's the main source of protein is meat. So he invented peanut butter as a way for people, ground up peanuts as a way for people to get protein if people had no teeth. This was before orthodontia and dentists and all that sort of thing. It was that's where peanut butter came from. It was a solution. Of course, now we love peanut butter all the time because it's so tasty. But back then, it was originally invented because people couldn't get their protein if they didn't have teeth. And it's not only just being able to eat, but there's a lot of industries where you might use your teeth to cut thread, or there's just the mouth is an incredibly powerful thing to help you live in life. And without your teeth, it's quite possible that that you'd have a hard time. Now, this is another interesting thing. Can I digress here? I'll digress just a little bit. Because I was born with bad teeth. I wasn't born with bad teeth. I ate a lot of sugar when I was a kid and ended up with really, really bad teeth. It's amazing that if you go back 100 years ago and look at a lot of cultures that did not eat processed sugar, they have beautiful teeth. They have just big, white, bright, shiny, pearly teeth. And this happens in every culture pretty much across the world. And it's not until these cultures learn about sugar that their teeth go south. Now, why do I bring this up? It's because I think we should probably not get our children addicted. I've kind of come 180 degrees on this. I used to even hand out candy in church on Sunday. Which, one time is not going to kill somebody. But if you get children addicted to sugar like I was as a kid, that does harm your teeth. There was a movie I saw, a documentary on this, where it showed people in some African country from 100 years ago, where they actually had pictures, and it showed all their beautiful white, beautiful pearly white teeth against their black skin. And then sugar was introduced in the early 1900s, late 1800s. And then it shows what happens after that, and they all had horrible teeth. And so it really is true that sugar, refined processed sugar, is very, very bad for your teeth. Even if you floss, even if you gargle, even if you do all sorts of things, sugar is bad for your teeth. So I think parents know this now. I didn't know this. And so I'm very, very thankful that my parents, got me to a dentist where I had 8 cavities as a kid and had orthodontia to, straighten out my teeth and things like that. If I had it all to do over again, I would not give as much refined sugar to my children because it really does affect the teeth. And it shows here. I mean, back here, the teeth of your slave were probably fine-looking teeth, and they were able to do all sorts of things because they didn't have a processed and refined sugar back then. And if you lost a tooth, it was a pretty severe thing. So the slave got to go free if he lost his tooth. If he knocks out a tooth or if he knocks out his eye, the slave gets to go free. So that's pretty interesting. All right, let's go to verse 28, because this is interesting. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring, and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or a woman, the bull is to be stoned, and its owner also to be put to death. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the boar gores a son or daughter. If the boar gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. So here you have it again. Couple things. First of all, this obviously now, I mean, this is the first time we see it, but this is obviously applying case law because the payment is 30 shekels. So as the value of the shekel decreases with the society around it, maybe it goes from 30 shekels to 50 shekels to 100 shekels. I mean, obviously there's always inflation at some level. And so this isn't adjusted for inflation, but you can imagine that over time, they would have to adjust this 30 shekels or control for inflation, which is almost impossible. But it's if you have a bull, the bull gores somebody and it's an accident, okay, you pay a fine. But if they told you this bull is going to get out and it's going to kill somebody and you don't do anything about it and it gets out and it kills somebody, then you have to take your life, although you could be, you redeem yourself with a fine. Now, and we also see this whole idea of redemption. So think about this. This is all legalese about redemption. And if you think about what Jesus did, right, he redeemed us. And what was that redemption? The redemption is that we did something that is worthy of our life being taken. And Jesus steps in and pays the fine for us, the redemption for us, so that our life is not taken. So this puts a beautiful flavor on the whole idea of redemption and the power of that word. And because Jesus he does redeem us. That's just a wonderful, wonderful way of looking at it. We'll continue on. Verse 33. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange. So this almost sounds like he's repeating himself, but I still get the idea that Moses is there talking to God and saying, okay, I see the 10 Commandments. How do we apply it? And so they're coming up with this case law of how to apply the 10 Commandments. And Moses and God are just having a conversation. Okay, once I had this situation, this is how I handle it. And God says, great, or no, I'd handle it this way. And they're just kind of settling case law. And the thing that I find out just so fascinating about it is how practical it is. I mean, really, I don't think anybody would look at this case law and say, that's impractical. I think as I look at this, it seems perfectly reasonable. You dig a pit and somebody else's bull falls in the pit and dies. You pay him for the bull, but you get to keep the meat. I mean, that sounds really like a very, very wise and judicious way to handle this situation. And so if it's wise there, then it's probably wise everywhere else. None of these are out of the ordinary for the time that these people lived in. This is perfectly normal stuff. And I'm just grateful that up to this point, I really don't see anything that doesn't seem fair or equitable or anything like that. People have this image of God in the Old Testament as being just this horrible judge. And he's not. He gives the 10 Commandments because that's how we can live a wonderful life. It's how a society can live together. Then he's giving these case laws to just apply the 10 Commandments, but none of them seem horrible. None of them seem like God is just this mean judge sitting on the throne. It really does, like if I were judge and sitting on the throne, these are some of the things that I would probably come up with also. And that really is kind of a cool way to think about it. Because we're talking about death, we're talking about gouging eyes and things like that. But remember, if there wasn't a complicated legal system back then, and you gouge out somebody's eye and he's the breadwinner for the family, or one of the people that's keeping that family afloat, there has to be a punishment. There has to be a threat don't do these things to people because it does cause injury, and we're going to compensate for those injuries. So anyway, that's the end of chapter 21. We'll get into 22, and we're going to talk about the protection of property when we get to that chapter. So we'll do that in the next episode. I think this is probably a good way to end it. So let's close in prayer. Gracious God, as we review these things, we realize what a just judge you are. But we also realize that when we fell short and did not keep your law, you sent your son Jesus to redeem us, and for that we are eternally thankful. Be with us until we meet again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. And I thank you for joining me today. We'll get together tomorrow, and until then, have a great day. Blessings. Bye.